How do I make a clay figure based on a cartoon character? In this video, I'll be showing you how I do it and giving you tips and tricks on how I make each figure. This is the supplies you'll need to make a clay figure. Aluminum foil, also known as tinfoil, oven baked sculpty clay, some wire to make the legs and neck of the character. You'll need some acrylic paint. I get Liquid X basic acrylic paint. They sell it at Michael's. And then for the skin tone of the characters, I've found that Americana Natural Buff tends to be the best skin tone color I've found. Okay, and so some other supplies you might need is a pen, gel super glue, an X-Acto blade, some paintbrushes. Kind of just get ones of different sizes. And you'll need some sort of wire cutter. You could probably use scissors, but it's easier just to use wire cutters if you have them. And then you might want some clay tools. I don't always use these on figures. They're not a necessary thing. Okay, so before you start the clay figure, you're going to want to gather a bunch of references of the character you want to make. You're going to want to gather as many angles and references that you can find of that character. This might sound complicated, but it really isn't. There's something called Wikipedia. This is where they have a bunch of information on different shows and stuff, and different fandoms. They also have a gallery section, and usually they have gallery sections for random characters and cartoons and stuff, so it's pretty easy to find references of the characters you want to make. So basically, people have already gathered all the references for you. You just have to go to the Wikipedia for the fandom or whatever you like. Okay, once you have all the references you need, you can get some tinfoil out. Okay, so you might want to also base the size off of other characters too and see what there's, how, like, this character is a head taller than Coco, so I'm basing him off of Coco's height. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in the reference section. Just get one that shows other characters next to the character. Okay, and so for the tinfoil, you'll just make the shapes of the character. So for him, he's kind of like an oval, square-shaped body. And same for the head, it's like an oval, square-shaped body. But obviously for different characters, their bodies are different shapes. Like Claudie, her shape is more like tall and long. So you gotta make like a longer shape for the body. And then the head is just like a thinner oval. And then for a character like Hector, he's just kind of two circular shapes that you put together. And this is an example of shapes that you can find in other cartoon characters, just so you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to explain. The reason you use tinfoil is because it makes it a lot easier to make characters. The characters tend to keep their shapes, which makes it a lot easier to make them, and you make less mistakes when making the figure. It will also make the clay figure not super top heavy. This is the main reason why I would use tinfoil and not just make the whole figure out of clay. It will also save you on clay. Because the character is mostly made out of tinfoil, it's a lot cheaper than just buying a bunch of clay. Now that the tinfoil is done, surround the tinfoil with a thin layer of clay. Try to make the clay as thin a layer as possible on the head so it's not super top heavy. Once the tinfoil is surrounded with clay, it's time to get the wire. This is where you're going to need to cut the wire. You should cut one piece of wire for the neck and then two other pieces for the legs of the character. Some of my clay figures I made holding something. To make them in a slight pose, you might want to use some wire to hold the arm in place. Okay, so you're going to want to poke a hole in the bottom of the head for the neck and then the top of the body for the neck. Then just put the neck wire piece in both of the holes. Then you're going to want to poke two holes for the legs of the character. Then you're going to want to put the wire in place. You might want to check if the character is the right height you want it to be. And also, depending on the character I'm making, I might just leave the wire exposed because their legs are very thin. But for a character like Try, or maybe Nathan, you would want to make the character a lot bigger. So you'd want to make the legs not just wire. You'd want to surround them with tinfoil, just like you did for the body. But also, if your character has like a long dress, you might want to try to do what I'm doing here. So I surround the body part with tinfoil in the shape of the dress. Just kind of get it to the size I want, and just make sure it's the size I want. Some characters that I've done this technique for are Miss Baker, Rita, and obviously the character I'm working on right now, Claudie. Once you got the tinfoil to the size you want, take the tinfoil off and surround the whole piece of tinfoil with clay. Try to do as little clay as possible, but cover as much of it as you can. And then for a bigger character like Try, you surround the legs with a thin layer of clay too. Okay, and so now we're going to work on the arms. Because Try has bigger arms, I do the same thing. I make tinfoil arm shapes so I don't use so much clay. But for most other characters that are like thinner, especially, I don't use any tinfoil for their arms. I just make their arms completely out of clay. I just kind of roll it out in a long oval shape and then add a thumb for the hand and then just connect it to the body. But for bulkier characters like Try, I just surround the tinfoil with clay and then try to make it in an arm shape to the best of my ability. Because I use the tinfoils to make the arms bigger, I make the hands a separate piece. How I do this is I roll it like an oval shape and then I make a thumb, and it kind of should be a similar shape to like a mitten. Then stick the finger onto the arm and blend it in place. This is really the only thing I use clay tools for, and it's to separate the arms from the body on bigger characters. Okay, now we're on to the fun part, also known as the kinda confusing part. Depending on your character, you won't have to do anything to make the hair, or depending on the character, you have to do a lot for the hair. For me, if a part of the character's hair isn't visually 3D, I don't make it 3D on my clay figure because it's easier to paint. So for Clarence and Jeff, their hair isn't visually 3D, it's like flat on the character, so I just draw the hair onto the character and paint it onto the character. But for someone like Belson, which is kind of similar to Try and what I'm doing right now, is I kind of just make random circles and kind of just have to guess because the hair kind of changes depending on the angle and stuff, but you kind of can get an idea if you look at it a lot, but it's really confusing to understand the hair. I would recommend getting a back profile, a side profile, and a front profile when doing the hair. I tend to look at the back profile first, then I go to the front profile, and then I look at the side profile. The side profile will be what the back of the hair actually looks like, if that makes sense. Because they're a cartoon, you can't actually see the shapes of the back of the head. You only see the sides of the head when you're looking at the back, because it's a cartoon. So the only way to see the back of the head shape is to look at the side profile. Most characters aren't really that confusing to understand. It's mostly just for Belson, Gilbin, Joshua, and Try. Those are like the most complicated hairs out of them all. So they're the hardest ones to understand, if that makes sense. The other ones are pretty self-explanatory, what the back and side of the head kind of look like. It's just for Belson and some of the characters with more lumpy hair, it's kind of confusing. I just have to keep messing with the hair until I get it the way I think it looks in the show. So right here, I'm just like swapping pieces around because I felt like one was bigger than the other when it should have been the opposite. So I just kind of swap things, move stuff around until I think it looks like the hair. Okay, and so for characters who have like ponytails, I make the ponytail base out of tinfoil, like I did for the body and the face. Make that, and then I make a hole for the wire and connect it in the back of the head. I make a hole in the back of the head for wire. Then I surround the ponytail with clay. But for characters with like longer hair, I use the same technique that I kind of use for the dress, where I do like a thin layer of tinfoil surrounded with clay, and I just connect it to the back of the head. Honestly, this character has probably one of the more complicated hairs. It's really confusing to understand. And this is why it's easier just to have the head as a separate piece, too. Because then you can, like, mess with it more. His hair is very different than most characters. And also, it changes depending on the episode. So I'm just going to kind of, like... This is what I mean by I just kind of need to guess what it looks like. Because, like... Or I have to kind of guess what I feel like if there was a figure of him, how it would look. And on most figures, they kind of make both sides kind of similar to each other too. So like pretty much in every cartoon they just like flip the face of the character when they're animating. So a character with like a side part will be facing on the left side one time, and then other times it will be facing on the right side. So you kind of just have to decide for that character what way you want it to face. Okay, what if a character doesn't really have hair, but they have other visual features like glasses? How I make glasses is I roll out a ball and then flatten it. I do this twice for both lenses, and then I stick it onto the figure's face. But if you can see the side of the glasses, like the arms of the glasses, I just use wire and cut it to the right size. But let's say your character has clear glasses like Miss Baker. You don't do anything right now, wait until you're done painting the figure. I know that might sound weird, but wait until you're done painting the figure to make those glasses. Near the end of the video, I'll show an example of how I would make clear glasses. I forgot to add this in, so I'm adding it last minute. This is how you would do someone's hair like Sumo. So for Sumo, he has like a bunch of small hairs poking out of his head. So I got thinner wire than I used for the legs, and I poked it into the clay. Then I took the wire out of the clay figure, put it in the oven, and then after it was done in the oven, I glued all the hairs back into the figure. There are more characters that use this technique for, like Jimmy and Sumo's sister. The last thing I do on the face is usually the ears and the nose. Not all characters have ears and noses, but depending on the character, their nose can be different shapes. Just try to replicate the shape to the best of your ability. But for ears for characters, they're usually the same exact shape. I just make like a flat oval shape and connect it to the side of the face. The only cartoon character that has like a weird unique ear shape that I can think of is Lars. You would probably have to make his ears differently, but besides that, it would probably just be this same technique. There are parts of characters that are 3D that aren't just on the face. Some characters have like bow ties, turtlenecks, collars to their shirt, zippers. Just depending on the character, you have to make different shapes. Like for Claudia right now, I'm making her have a necklace, so I'm just making really small circle shapes and connecting them to the body. Once I'm finished with the face and the body, I work on the feet. The feet are usually really easy to make because most characters just wear blank shoes, at least in Clarence. So basically what I do is I roll out like an oval shape and then I poke the wire into the foot so I can glue it on later. Obviously the size of the oval depends on the size of the character. If a character is bigger, you might want to make the feet bigger because the character might fall over if the feet are too small. There are some characters that I felt that it's necessary to make parts of their shoes 3D. Like Belson's mom, she has like laces on her shoes. The substitute teacher, Miss Julep, she has like high top shoes. And then also Joshua, he has like socks that go around his shoes. And I would just try to make it close to the shape of those accessories that would be on the shoes. Once you're done making with clay, put the figure together to see if it looks how you want it to look. Just take one last look at your character and also take one last look at references to make sure it looks as accurate as possible. If you think it looks good, then take the figure apart and get it ready to put in the oven. I baked the clay at 275 in the oven for around 15 minutes. Once your character is done in the oven, I would let it cool for like 8 minutes before doing the next step. Okay, so the next step is you glue the figure together. I have found that gel superglue is the best option. Normal superglue, also known as like the liquid superglue, is very runny and it's hard to control, where gel superglue is very easy to use, and I make a lot less mistakes using the gel superglue. And the superglue dries like really fast. You only need to wait like 5 seconds before you can do the next step. Okay, this step is kind of optional. If your character has a hard time standing, I use an X-Acto blade and slowly cut the feet so they're really flat. I do this very carefully to make sure I don't cut myself. My characters hardly ever fall, and I feel like this is the reason why. I've gotten really good at making sure the feet are even so it doesn't topple over. Sometimes there are characters with heels, like Miss Baker, some other characters, and obviously Claudia. Claudia is the character I'm working on right now. So I just kind of cut a triangle with the X-Acto blade and keep on messing with it until the heels look similar to each other and also kind of look kind of like it does in the show. But it's not always the fully accurate because I still need to make the character stand. Now before I paint the figure, I need to mark out different areas on the figure where I'm going to have to paint stuff. Like I mark the pants, the shirt, and obviously I draw on the face of the character. If you do this step, it makes it way easier to paint the figure because you already have the face and the body like laid out where you need to paint certain things, so you make less mistakes. After I'm done sketching out the design for the face and the body, I cut 3 lines on the hand for the fingers. Since there's 4 fingers, you can do 3 lines to make the 4 fingers. I've found that it's easier to do the fingers this way than to make 4 individual fingers when making the hands. And then I came back and I really didn't like how the face looked. I didn't think it looked like Try. So I went over the face with white paint to correct the face and make it look more like Try. You want to get the face to look as close to the character as you can. The more accurate, the better. It will speed up the process when actually painting the figure, because you already have the likeness of the character drawn onto the figure. Okay, so this is what a character should kind of look like before you paint the figure. Just try to get it to look as close to the character as possible. I paint my figures for TikTok videos, so I'm going to try to show you as best as possible by doing a voiceover over my TikTok videos and just showing the paints I use. The main paint I use is Americana Natural Buff. This helps me get the skin tone for each of the characters I make. Some characters I just use the paint right out of the bottle, like for Jeff and Percy. But for other characters I have to mix some brown colors. I use this like orangish brown, and then there's like the more traditional brown color. And then also I would have some like warm tint paint colors, like yellows, red, and pinks. For anyone who's wondering why I didn't mention orange, in that list of warm colors is because I don't really have any orange colors. The closest I have is this like dark orangish yellow color that I use to mix different skin tones. I use like this creamy yellow and then this primary yellow. And those are the two yellow paints I use. The creamy yellow is really useful for hair. And also the basic brown is extremely useful to make different hair colors. The most useful color when painting is definitely white. It kind of just helps me mix the colors and make them as accurate as possible. Some colors that I basically just use for their outfits is blue, purple, and green. I also use two different gray paints. I use a warm gray and a cool gray. Warm gray is like warm tone, so it kind of goes with red, orange, and yellow. And then cool gray is like blue toned, so it kind of goes with the cool colors like blue, green, and purple. This is a newer paint I started using. It's black, light, neon. It helps me get like the super neon kind of tones that a lot of Clarence characters have. I feel like this is a paint that's really only useful for Clarence characters, but if you want to make Clarence characters, I would highly recommend getting this color. If a character has a clear part like glasses, this is how I would make them. I just use some old plastic packaging and cut a piece out to make it into glasses. For glasses, I like to fold the plastic in half, then cut the piece into a circle. This will make like a figure 8 shape, which is perfect for glasses. A lot of glasses in cartoons aren't fully transparent, they're only partially transparent, and to get that look, I like to do 2 coats of Mod Podge on one side of the glasses. After the Mod Podge is dry, I outline the plastic with black paint. This is to give the glasses the cartoon look. Once you're done painting the figure, it's time to draw on the features again. I start by painting the pupil of the eye with black paint. Then I'll outline the hair with a black pen, the mouth, and the eyes. Depending how complicated the character's hair is, you might have to do it with just a pen. Like for Try, his hair is very bumpy and not very flat on the character, so I just have to outline it with black paint and be as precise as possible. I go over with the same color I used to paint the hair afterwards to correct my mistake. Once you're done painting the figure, you're probably done making the figure. But if your character has clear glasses, right now you'd be gluing them on the face. I hope this video has helped you if you want to make figures in the future. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I want to be motivated to post more YouTube videos.